Have you ever noticed how the smallest insults are the ones that stay lodged in your memory? Not the big betrayals, not the loud arguments, but those quiet little moments when someone looked at you like you didn't matter. Why is it that years can pass, entire seasons can change, yet that one disrespectful glance still burns like fresh fire? Maybe because deep down, all we ever want is simple, to be treated like a human being, to be seen, to be valued, to be safe. And some people, the arrogant kind, think they can snatch that safety away without consequences. That's how this story begins, with the kind of insult that could break a person. But before we get there, picture this: a peaceful restaurant on a calm afternoon. Soft clinking of forks, murmurs of conversations. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous. Just a place where people came to breathe. Until the door slammed open so hard it rattled the glasses. Every head snapped up. A small black boy stumbled in. Maybe 10, maybe 11, his eyes red, breath ragged, chest rising and falling like he'd been running through fear itself. His hands trembled, not from cold, but from something much darker. And in a voice that cracked halfway through the sentence, he shouted words that turned that quiet restaurant into a frozen photograph. "Please, someone help. They're hitting my mother." Nobody moved, not because they didn't care, but because fear can lock a room in place like cement. A few people whispered, a few looked away, and one man, sitting alone in the darkest corner, untouched meal in front of him, slowly lifted his eyes. The boy didn't see him, didn't know him, didn't understand the weight of the shadow he was running toward. But everyone else in the restaurant did. And that's why the air suddenly shifted, thin tight, trembling, like the moment before lightning splits the sky. Because there are people in this world you do not disturb. People whose presence alone makes the room stand up straighter. People who carry a past so heavy you can feel it in your bones. The boy, innocent and desperate, had just run to that man. And what he whispered next would make that man break a promise he had buried years ago. A promise made beside someone he lost. A promise he hoped he'd never have to revisit. But life has a way of dragging old ghosts into the light the moment someone cries out for help. Before the boy ever burst through that door, his world had already been falling apart in ways no child should ever experience. His mother worked 2 shifts at a rundown laundry, barely enough to scrape together rent, let alone respect. And in that neighborhood, respect mattered more than money. Because the wrong people, the arrogant ones, smelled vulnerability like wolves smell blood. It began with insults. Quiet ones. Sharp ones. The kind meant to embarrass her in front of others. A customer snapping fingers at her. A neighbor muttering something under his breath. A stranger on the street looking at her like she didn't belong. Every jab chipping away at her spirit. Every slight telling her she was less. Until one day, she couldn't hide the hurt from her own son. And the boy, oh, he felt every wound she endured as if it were carved into him. So when the shouting started that day, when those men cornered her behind the shop, when they shoved her just to see her stumble, something inside the boy snapped. He wasn't big. He wasn't strong. But he had courage, the desperate kind only fear can forge. He tugged their arms. He cried. He begged them to stop. They laughed at him. They called him names. They told him to run along. But then one of them raised a hand against his mother. That was the moment he ran. Not for himself. For her. For the one person who taught him kindness, even when life gave her cruelty. He sprinted through alleys, across streets, past people who didn't stop, didn't look, didn't see the terror on his face. And when he pushed through that restaurant door, he didn't think. He didn't choose. He simply threw himself into the room, searching for anyone who might care. He yelled. He pleaded. He cried. And he ran straight toward a man sitting alone at the back. A man he did not recognize, whose silence felt thick and heavy, whose presence everyone else avoided. The boy thought he had found just another stranger. He didn't know the truth. He didn't know that this man was the one person in that restaurant nobody dared to disturb. He didn't know the kind of power sitting in that corner. Power earned in the shadows. Power feared by the arrogant. Power that had been sleeping until a frightened child shook it awake. The boy stood, trembling, pleading for someone, anyone, to help his mother. But of all the faces in that restaurant, only one didn't flicker with hesitation, fear, or avoidance. Only one remained perfectly still. The man in the corner. At first glance, he looked ordinary. Quiet. Reserved. A simple suit, worn shoes, a meal untouched. But there was something about him the room understood instinctively. A heaviness. A silence that wasn't shy. It was calculated. Controlled. Dangerous. People didn't sit near him. People didn't look too long in his direction. People didn't breathe too loudly when they passed his table. Because everyone in that restaurant knew something the boy didn't. This man was not someone you interrupted. He never raised his voice. He never boasted. But the air bent differently around him. Like even the shadows stood at attention. The boy didn't see any of that. Desperation had blinded him to danger. He only saw a man with eyes that might listen. And that was enough. The man slowly lifted his gaze. Not fast, not startled, just raised it, as if he had been expecting something like this, though he clearly hadn't. And in that moment, he wasn't looking at a boy. He was looking at a memory, a promise, a ghost he thought he'd buried the night a woman died in his arms. An innocent woman who once told him, everyone has a little good left in them, even you. He hadn't believed her, until he regretted it too late. Since that day, he had sworn off involvement, sworn to let the world be, no matter how ugly it became, sworn to sit in corners, eat in silence, and keep his past locked away. But now a little boy stood shaking before him, a child begging him to stop the kind of cruelty he had once sworn to destroy. He didn't speak. He didn't stand. He simply closed his eyes for just a second, and in that second, something in the room shifted. A storm was forming behind his calm expression. The boy didn't see it, but the rest of the restaurant did. The waiter stepped back. A couple stopped mid-bite. Someone whispered, "Oh no," because they all understood. If this man got up from his chair, someone, somewhere, was about to pay. The man rose from his chair with a slowness that made the entire room tense. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just deliberate. Like each movement carried the weight of a decision he couldn't undo once made. The boy looked up at him, confused. He didn't know why everyone else grew quiet. Didn't know why people subtly backed away from the path to the door. Didn't know why even the waiter whispered, "God help whoever's on the other side of that." He only knew this stranger was following him. As they stepped outside, the boy kept glancing back, trying to understand. "Sir, please hurry. They're hurting her." But the man didn't quicken his pace. Instead, he asked softly, "What's your mother's name?" The boy told him. The man's jaw tightened. Not in anger, something deeper, quieter. Something that made the air around them feel heavier. They reached the alley behind the laundry shop first. A scream echoed. The boy flinched. The man didn't. 3 men stood over the woman, laughing, sneering, throwing words meant to humiliate. Words that sting sharper than fists. Words used by people who believe kindness makes someone weak. One of them said, "Should have stayed in your place." The man stepped forward, and he didn't shout, didn't threaten, didn't even touch them. He simply spoke one name, the name of the man holding the woman's arm. A soft whisper, barely louder than a breath. But that whisper froze the abuser like ice water down the spine. The aggressor turned slowly, his face drained of color. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried to speak, failed, then tried again. "Sir, I didn't know she didn't tell us she was." The man stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You hurt a woman," he said quietly. "You laughed at a child, and you expect excuses to save you." "And no, sir, I didn't mean." "You meant every word," the man replied. "I heard enough." The alley fell completely silent, because real fear is quiet. Real power whispers. And in that silence, even the boy realized, this man was no ordinary stranger. This was someone whose reputation traveled before he did. Someone feared not for what he did, but for what he could do. And the aggressors knew. They had insulted the wrong family today. The abusers backed away, trembling, stumbling over their own feet. But the man didn't look at them anymore. His eyes were on the woman, battered and breathless, holding herself up against the wall. For the first time in years, something broke through the armor he wore around his heart. Recognition. Not of her face, no, but of her kindness. A kindness he had once received when he least deserved it. Years ago, before power hardened him, before the world carved scars into him, he was just another broken man trying to survive. He remembered collapsing behind a bakery after a brutal night, not from violence, but from hunger and exhaustion. He remembered waking up to warm food, wrapped in a towel, and a woman's soft voice saying, "Eat. Nobody should suffer alone." He never saw her face clearly, but he remembered her hands, her voice, her humanity. And now, he recognized those same hands trembling in front of him. He crouched beside her, his tone gentler than anyone expected. "You helped someone once," he said quietly. "Someone you didn't know. Someone the world had given up on." She frowned through the pain. I don't remember." "You wouldn't," he replied. "But I do." The boy looked between them, stunned. "You know my mom?" Before the man could answer, one of the attackers whispered, "Sir, please, let us go." The man stood slowly and turned toward them. But he didn't strike them, didn't threaten, didn't touch. He simply reached into his coat and pulled out a phone. "You assaulted a woman," he said, and a child watched. "There will be consequences." The men panicked. "No, please. We're sorry." She started yelling. She yelled. The man interrupted. "Because you insulted her. Because you thought she was beneath you." His voice lowered dangerously. "And you're about to learn what happens when you shove someone who stands taller than you ever will." He made one call, just one, and whatever was said on the other end drained every ounce of hope from the attackers' faces. But the boy didn't care about them anymore. He looked at the man with wide, disbelieving eyes. "Why did you help us?" The man looked at the mother, really looked, and for a moment, all his shadows softened. "Because once," he said, "your mother saved me, and she never even knew." The sirens never came. Not because help wasn't called. Help was already on the way, just not the kind the abusers expected. The man put the callers in motion with a single sentence. They laid hands on a woman and mocked her child. That was enough. But he didn't threaten the attackers, didn't boast, didn't reveal titles or positions. That was never his style. Real power doesn't roar. It rearranges the world quietly. The first to arrive wasn't the police. It was a black car with tinted windows, rolling into the alley like a shadow. Two men stepped out, not thugs, not henchmen, professionals in suits who moved with quiet precision. They weren't violent. They didn't need to be. The attackers recognized them instantly, and recognition alone made their knees wobble. "Gentlemen," one of the newcomers said, "our employer is displeased." No, please, we didn't know. She said things we didn't mean." "You meant every word," the suited man replied calmly. "And now you will make amends." But it wasn't revenge the man in the corner wanted. It was accountability. The suited men guided the attackers into the car. Not forcefully, not brutally, but with a dignity the aggressors hadn't offered their victim. That's what made it sting the most. As the door shut, the mother whispered weakly, "Where were they taking them?" The man answered honestly. "To people they owe an explanation to." Not a threat, a statement of fact. The boy stared, or replacing fear. "You didn't even touch them." The man looked down at him. "Touching people is easy," he said quietly. "Making them understand is harder." The mother lowered her head, overwhelmed, not just by what happened, but by the strange, powerful mercy behind it. "You didn't have to get involved," she whispered. The man paused, his face tightening at something unseen. "Yes, I did," he said softly, "because pain like yours, I've caused it before, and I'll never let it happen in front of me again." The boy blinked. "You're a good man?" The man shook his head slowly. "No, but I'm trying to become one." And for a split second, even the shadows seemed to step back from him. Long after the black car disappeared, the alley remained oddly quiet. But it wasn't fear now, it was something softer, something closer to relief. The man helped the mother stand, supporting her like she was made of something precious, not fragile. She winced but stayed upright, dignity returning to her posture piece by painful piece. "Come," he said gently. "There's a friend of mine nearby." "A doctor?" "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "I don't want trouble. I don't want debts." "Kindness," he replied, "is not a debt." The boy walked beside them, watching the stranger like he was trying to memorize every step. There was something different about this man. Not just his power, not just his silence, but the way he seemed to carry regret like other people carry memories. As they reached the street, the boy tugged the man's sleeve. "Sir, will they hurt those men?" The man looked down at him, truly looked, and answered with the kind of honesty that earns a child's trust for life. "No, they will be corrected, and they will learn never to underestimate someone again." The boy nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson. The mother looked at the man with confusion. "You speak like someone who's seen a lot." He hesitated before responding. "I've seen what happens when good people stay silent." She didn't know what that meant. But decades of hardship had given her a sixth sense. She felt the weight behind his words. As they reached the corner, he stopped in front of a small clinic. The doctor, an older man with sharp eyes, stepped out instantly. "You brought someone," the doctor said, voice knowing. "Yes," the man replied. "Take care of her." "On my account." The doctor nodded. "Of course." The mother stared. "Sir, I can't accept." His voice softened. "You once fed a broken man behind a bakery. You didn't ask his name. You didn't ask for money. You just helped him." Her eyes widened. I remember a night like that, but..." He smiled faintly. "You gave me kindness when the world didn't. Let me return one piece of it." She covered her mouth, tears slipping through her fingers, not from pain, but from being seen, truly seen, after so many years of invisibility. And as she was guided into the clinic, the boy turned back one last time. "Sir, what should I call you?" The man paused, and then he said a name the mother had once whispered in kindness to a stranger who never forgot her. The boy's eyes widened. The doctor's brows lifted. The name meant nothing to outsiders, but everything to her. The door of the clinic closed softly behind the mother, and for the first time since she had screamed for help, the air felt gentle. Calm. Safe. The boy lingered beside the man a moment longer, unsure what to say, unsure how to thank someone whose presence felt too large for simple words. The man rested a hand lightly on the boy's shoulder. "She'll be all right," he said quietly. "She's stronger than the world ever gave her credit for." The boy's voice cracked. People have always treated us like we're nothing." The man crouched, meeting him eye to eye. "People fear what they don't understand, and they mock what they're afraid to face in themselves." The boy swallowed hard. "Is that why they hit her?" "That," the man said, "and because they thought nobody would stop them." He brushed dust from the boy's sleeve, a gesture strangely gentle for someone whose reputation could silence a room. "Remember this," he added softly. "Bullies win only when good people stay quiet. But the moment one person stands up, just one, the world changes." The boy nodded slowly, absorbing every word like scripture. The man rose, ready to return to his shadowed life. But before he stepped away, the doctor called after him. "You don't get to disappear this time." The man turned. "She saved you once," the doctor said. "Let her know it mattered." For a long moment, the man said nothing, but something in his expression shifted, like a door unlocking somewhere deep inside. Finally, he replied, "She already knows. She saw it in her son today." The boy's throat tightened. "Will I see you again?" The man hesitated, then placed a small card into the boy's hand. "Give this to your mother when she's healed," he said. "Tell her it's time she stopped fighting the world alone." "What is it?" the boy asked. "A chance," the man replied. "One she earned years ago without knowing." And with that, he turned and walked away. Not into danger, not into darkness, just into the quiet, steady anonymity he had lived in for years. But his steps were different now, lighter, more certain, as if helping them had repaired something broken in him too. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness, feeding a hungry stranger behind a bakery, can echo across a lifetime. Sometimes the people the world dismisses rise higher than those who try to shame them. And sometimes all it takes to reclaim your dignity is one voice saying, "Enough."